Morning, church family. Good to see you all here this morning. Appreciate the presence of you all, and I am glad to know that we are still ready to, or that everyone's still here, hadn't left for vacation yet, because I know that here in a couple of weeks, I'm sure, we'll start seeing smaller and smaller numbers as people go and do their vacations, and I too pray that everyone will have a good, relaxing vacation and that they will come back refreshed and ready to go. I'm looking forward to hearing what the report is on the children's homes. We have one this week, and then at the end of the month, we'll have Sunny Glenn will be here to talk to us as well. So I'm excited about that. We are continuing our study on how to or what does it mean to activate our faith. And today we're going to continue our study with Abraham. Last time we did some passages from James, and I'm seeing it, and I'm sure since many of you are way smarter than me, you are seeing some patterns here that are involved. And I would be willing to bet you, if you go back and remember what we talked about in the book of James, you're going to see some of the same patterns here today as we look at Abraham and what happens to Lot. Last time we talked about Abraham, I said there was a part 2 to this little story about Abraham and Lot's separation, and we're going to finish that this morning. So we're still in Genesis chapter 13, starting in verse 5. I really want to commend Parker for his reading. He did a really good job, and I appreciate him for that. So what motivates Lot's decision? If you remember, there was, and some of you said, well, Blan, the motivation for Lot's decision was the conflict between the two herdsmen. I don't know. I think that was the start of it. That's what got everything started. But there was a conflict between Lot's herdsmen and Abraham's herdsmen. Abraham says, you know what? We shouldn't be fighting. Let's separate. You go one way, I'll go the other. And like you go left, I'll go right, whatever. But there's a reason why Lot chose to go where he went. And so what we're really looking at is what motivated Lot to look at the decisions to go to the land of the east. Now I want you to pay attention to some things. I want you to notice that Lot does not seek the Lord's counsel. He doesn't ask God, where should I go? Afterwards, you'll never read about Lot building altars. You won't read about Lot calling on the name of the Lord. So, how did Lot make his decision? I believe the first decision, he made a decision by first seeing how much he desired the land. Look again at Genesis 13:10. It says that Lot looked up and saw the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. Notice the phrase, like the land of Egypt. I believe Egypt made quite an impression on Lot when he and Abraham and the whole group went down there during the famine. So much that he got hooked. Lot liked the river Nile. It was far more dependable than the rivers of Canaan. And so that trip to Egypt that Lot and Abraham took had a tremendous impact on the way two men looked at some things in different ways. You see, Abraham comes back to Canaan. And when he comes back, he is humbled. Abraham came back with his tail between his legs because Pharaoh challenged his faith. And he said, I will never lose my faith in front of another person again. I will not lose my integrity. I will not embarrass my Lord. I am going back to the promised land, and I am staying. Nothing's going to move me. Lot comes back, and he says, I like herds and I like flocks, but I really like rivers and I really like grassland. You see, Egypt only increased Lot's desire. And the text says when Lot looked up and saw the whole plain, it's not talking about him just opening his eyes and going, oh, look, wow, that looks really good. No. That verse implies a longing, a lust, if you will, a desire. And the whole text says that Lot looked up and saw the land had water. That means he wanted it. He wanted it. He longed to have it. He wanted more land, more water, and more than he wanted a land of promise. In the Bible, that is living by sight, not by faith. I think another reason what motivated Lot's desire was a desensitized view of the flesh. Look at verse 13. It says, now the men in Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. Everybody knew what was going on in Sodom. If you have somebody traveling through your area and they're going through, and you know this area better than they do, you might tell them, now over in this town, there's some good places to eat, there's some good places to stay, there's some this, that, and the things to do there, but don't go to X city. You don't want to go there. Lot knew what was going on in Sodom. Why would he, why in the world would he want to raise his family near that place? Oh, sure, there's lots of thoughts going through Lot's head. Well, maybe they need a witness too. Maybe they need to know about Jesus. Maybe they need to know about God. Maybe Lot said, well, I want my children to know about the real world. This run around, living in tents, going from place to place, trying to make ends meet, and trying to feed this whole herd of livestock, it's not what's happening right now in the real world. I want my children to see what's going on in the real world. Interesting little verse found in the New Testament about Lot in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 6 and 9. Peter says, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what's going to happen to the ungodly, and, verse 7 is the key, and if he rescued Lot, get this, a righteous man who was distressed by the filthy lies of lawless men. He goes on to say, in verse 9, the Lord knows how to rescue godly men of trials and to hold the unrighteous to the day of judgment and continued punishment. But let me tell you something. The point of all this is this, that God, the call of God is not to be distressed by sin. Everyone can be distressed by sin. The call of God is to be separated from it. Lot did not approve of what went on in those cities, and yet he stays there. We're going to find out in a couple of verses he does more than just stay there. But how do you explain that? How do you rationalize that? Well, here's one way of looking at it, and this is no secret. All sin has a hint of fascination about it when you realize it. It's amazing. There are certain sins that we just go, everybody does that. I mean, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. But then there are certain sins, when we see it, and we know about it, we are ready to let loose the dogs of war. There are certain sins, let's face it, there are certain sins that we hate, and yet the ones that we hate are the same ones that we are so curious about. We say we're against it, but we want to hear all the juicy details. Even though Lot, get this, now even though Lot was morally opposed to the lifestyle of Sodom, he was more intrigued enough not to want to live far away from it. And he evidently never considered the negative effect that would have on his children. Finally, you have the pride of life. If you go back and look at in the beginning of chapter 13, verses 2 and verses 5, there are two interesting little verses there. One, Abram became very wealthy in livestock and silver and gold. 13:2. Now, look at 13:5. Now, Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. Now, this is the very first time wealth is mentioned in the Bible. I'm not going to preach about wealth. I don't have to worry about preaching about wealth because I know, and you and I know, how we and what the Bible says about wealth. Wealth can either be a blessing or it can be a curse. And the first time it appears in the Bible is when it's about two different men. Now get this. One man has wealth, and he lives by a promise. The other man has wealth, but he lives by a present. The difference is Abraham had livestock, but livestock had Lot. Now, some of you farmers and ranchers can define that, I know. Abraham had livestock, but livestock had Lot. Now, did you catch that difference? It's a big difference. Lot had gotten a taste of the good life in Egypt. And his experiences there were resulting in a greater possession, must have stimulated for a desire for more. What Lot should have said to Abraham would have been, no, Uncle Abraham, stop. Look, you're the leader. You're the one who's gotten us this far. You pick where you want to go, and I'll take what's left. I mean, after all, everything that I've gotten is because of you. So you go first. But the pride of life will always step in and warp a very good decision. And I believe that is true because God knows that man is often willing to lose a lot in order to get a lot. And the irony here is that God would have blessed Lot for blessing Abraham because God already told Abraham back in 12:3, I will bless them that bless you. Lot could have received a lot if he put his promise first, believed in the promise first. So now we can go to the rest of the story. Genesis 13, starting in verse 14, we notice that this is the last time this affirmation of God to Abraham. Where does it come? It comes after. The Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had parted from him. Now, why would God wait? Why would God decide to tell him this promise after Abraham left? Probably because that was the condition of the promise. You see, back in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, the Lord said to Abram, leave your country, leave your people, and your father's household, and go to the land that I will show you. Get this, God waited until Abraham fully obeyed, bringing this affirmation to him. The call was not just to leave Ur. The call was not just to leave the land. The call had been to leave also his father's household, and Lot is a part of that household. Let me tell you something. I know it's hard to leave family. It's hard to make a good, solid break. I mean, Abraham's living in a strange land, doesn't know anything about the place, doesn't know where to go next. He's surrounded by pagans, by bloodthirsty Canaanites. But the one thing he does have, he has Sarah and he has Lot. He has some familiarity. And as the older man, as older as Abraham gets, and he's without children, maybe he's starting to put two and two together on his own and think that Lot is to become the son that he never had. And so he does leave his country, and he does leave his people, but he has not completely left his father's household. Abraham accomplished 2 out of the 3 requests of God. And God's still waiting on him. God wants equal obedience. God doesn't want you to just obey 2 of the 3. God wants you to obey everything that he commands. And in this case, God had to use, unfortunately, a bad circumstance, the quarreling and strife, to accomplish what he wanted to do. And this is not the first time we see God doing this. God does this many times. Over in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, you see that Jesus is saying to his disciples, "But you will receive power from the Holy Spirit, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, and in Judea, and in Samaria, to the very ends of the earth." And then you get all the way over to Acts chapter 6, and what do you see? They are still in Jerusalem. What happened to all this movement? You're going to be my witnesses to everybody. How can you do that if you're still stuck in Jerusalem? It takes the stoning of Stephen and the persecution of the new congregation in order for that church to pack up its stuff and move. And then when it moves, the church begins to grow. God waited for Abraham fully to obey, to bring his affirmation to him. God takes Abraham into a very tough situation. But he's doing this to save Abraham from the problems that he is going through, that he sees that Lot's having. The relationships with Lot. Because let me tell you something, Lot shows by his choices the kind of person he is, and who Lot will continue to be. If you go through Genesis and look at the verbs and describe, you'll see what Lot means. Genesis 3:10, Lot saw the land. He lusted after it. 13:11, Lot chooses for himself. 13:12, Lot pitched his tent near Sodom. I got that down. That's so impressive. I got that down twice. Now, Genesis 14:12, look at this. Now, Lot is living in Sodom. He takes his tents, he takes all of his camping equipment, rents a storage unit, and actually moves into a townhouse. All that distress over that filthy living, and yet now he's moved into the city. And then the piece of resistance is this. Over in 19:1, Lot is sitting in the gateway of Sodom. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but when you are sitting in the gateway of a city, in biblical times, that means you have become a leader or an elder in that city. In other words, you have established so much of a relationship with the people in that town that they have put their trust and faith in you. They consider you a wise man, and so now they are allowing you to sit at the city gates. He's accepted enough in the city, and they're working with him, and he's one of Sodom's leaders. Finally, look at 19:16. The angels come, and they're going to warn Lot. They say, "We are about to lay this city out. You need to get your family, and you need to go." And in verse 19:16, it says, he hesitated. Here is a man spared by the intercessions of his uncle and the grace of God, and he's not sure if he wants to leave. I believe God does not want that kind of man around Abraham. It is after Lot leaves the conditions that have been completely met that God says, "Abraham, you did right. You made the right decision. Look to the north, look to the south, look to the east, look to the west. Don't you worry about it, Abraham. All this is going to be yours." And so we have a conflict. You see, we have a conflict between a promise and a present. All of us look at promises and presents one way or the other based on how we see things. Look at the earthly man versus the spiritual man. Long-term good versus short-term gain. The earthly man will sacrifice long-term good for a short-term gain, and I believe Lot is an earthly man. Yes, Peter did call him righteous in 2 Peter 2:7, but his righteousness was because of the position, but he had earthly character. This is what Lot did. He chose to risk the important things for a temporary material advancement. He went to live near Sodom, and Peter says he was distressed by it. But here's the key. Even though Sodom stressed out Lot, his family wasn't stressed at all. His daughters picked men in Sodom to marry. His son-in-laws were warned by angels of God, and they were not going to leave the city. His wife was so attached to that place that even after they were leaving, she destroyed herself and disobeyed God and looked back. And the last picture we have of Lot in the Bible is not of a wealthy man. He's not wealthy, he's not content, he's an older man, he's living in his cave, he's getting drunk, and he's sleeping with his own daughters. He paid a really high price for considering the short term. Are there any Lots out here today? Now, sure, well, but I haven't done any of that. I know. But we won't buy it, we won't wear it, we won't bring it home unless it can fix all of our problems in 30 minutes or less. Often, the emphasis is on the immediate gratification, and it attempts to put an eternal realities on hold. I will put my spiritual realities on hold only if I can live for today. If you live like that very long, you're going to have some problems with your earthly in character. Are you willing to give up the present relationship for a future reward? See, the spiritual man will give up the present relationship for a spiritual reward. I believe Abraham, of course, was a spiritual man. Abraham didn't live to see his children. He didn't live to see his children possess one single square inch of the land, but the reality of the promise meant more than the comfort of the present. There is no harder area to give up than an earthly relationship. That is why the devil gives us so many opportunities to make so many of those kind of relationships. This whole story, this text begs us to let go and stay in the land of promise where we belong. Now, I don't know about you, what that means for you, but let me tell you something. Young people, college people, whatever people, young people, if you are in a relationship that involves present gratification, you really need to think about it. Older people, if you are in a business that is driven by now, if you are in a business that pushes aside future, then you need to ask yourself, where do you need to be? Many of you know Michelle, my wife. You know that she is by far the best half of this marriage. And no, I'm not saying this because I'm in trouble. You probably don't know that she is an answer to a prayer. A very big answer to a very big prayer. I mean, I could have easily married someone else. But the reason that she is so important is that you probably don't know that often ministers get tempted to say, why am I putting up with this? You will hear preachers want to quit the ministry and go back to living a regular life. Usually it occurs when someone dumps on the preacher or complains about something that's being done in the church. It would be so easy for a preacher just to say, calf rope, I am done. My wife is the kind of person who helps me be the kind of person that I believe God called me to be. It's hard. It's not hard to have relationships, but it is so hard to have the right ones. I'm going to say that again to young people and college people and people starting their lives. It is not hard to have relationships. It is extremely hard to have the right ones. Luke 14:26. Jesus doesn't pull any punches. If anyone wants to come and follow me, he has to hate his father. He has to hate his mother. He has to hate his brothers. He has to hate his sisters. He even has to hate his own wife in order to follow me. And to top it all off, if you can't pick up your own cross and carry it, you will not, cannot be my disciple. Who are you running around with? Who is tied on to you? Sometimes separation is what is needed. It's all about how you look at a promise, and it's how you look at a present. And the question for you this morning is, how's your vision? How's your vision? And who are you tied to? This morning, if you would like to respond to your needs, if you have any desires for prayer, if you need to prayers of a church, if you want to visit our elders, if you'd like to take on Christ in baptism, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.